Today's topic is feeling all the feels. We are emotional beings, I think innately, and emotions don't make sense necessarily. And we can often be experiencing a tangle of emotions that are actually contradictory all at the same time, which can get confusing and overwhelming, and that adds to the fray. So we're going to talk about navigating this realm of emotion and how we can allow ourselves to feel the feels, feel them all. But before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good morning, Rosalind. Good morning, Sue. So great to have you both here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. Today we're talking about feeling all the feels, all the emotions. And as an emotional person, I know through my life I have spent a lot of energy trying to understand the emotions. Like sometimes a wave of emotion will come over and I have no idea where it came from. There was nothing necessarily that would provoke that emotion or the degree of that emotion. I imagine you've had these experiences where maybe you just start crying uncontrollably at a movie or something, when it's a movie, but we're crying uncontrollably. And it's just like, oh my gosh, where did all this emotion come from? And I think culturally, we're taught in a lot of ways to suppress emotion, to stifle ourselves. And that emotion is actually energy. And emotion, energy in motion. And when we stop that motion, it gets pent up. It's like a pressure cooker. And we often just sort of stomp it away, and then boom, it comes out in all kinds of weird ways. So Sue says, yes, waves of emotion come over me all of the time out of nowhere. So there are a couple things to say about that, Sue. One is, as I know you to be an empath. And this was something for me growing up. I am natively very empathic, meaning I pick up what's going on around me. And one of the ways that I pick up what's going on around me has historically been through emotion. And Sue, that may very well be the case with you, is that you're picking up somebody else's experience, and that can happen. And growing up, I didn't know what was me and what was not me. I didn't understand until years later that I was picking up a lot of the emotional energy in my family that was very deeply suppressed. And I was kind of the canary in the coal mine. I was the one that was experiencing it. That's one thing about emotion. So sometimes we experience emotion that isn't actually ours, and a really good practice, super powerful, super simple practice for when we're experiencing emotionality. This is a really simple thing, and just take your hand and rub it from the forehead to the nape of your neck and say, I'm me and only me. And what that means is not that I'm diminutive in any way, I'm me and only me, but that I am having my energy and not others, not the energy of others, meaning my energy is mine. I guess we could say that too. My energy is mine. Or for me, I'm me and only me works well. And you can experiment with that, but it makes a big difference because somehow it allows you to just reconsolidate your own energy. So that's for those of us who are empathic. But beyond that, there can be such a confusion of feelings. And then the confusion adds another layer or another uh, dimension to the whole experience of these multiple feelings, emotions all at once. So, as I've been telling you, I'm in the process of moving and disassembling a context that I've lived in for the past 24 years. And there are all kinds of emotions attendant to it. So there's emotions of loss for the goodbyes that I need to be saying, and the goodbyes to places, the goodbyes to people where I don't know what the future will bring in terms of face-to-face, one-on-one contact. And we never know what the future will bring. It's just that certain circumstances of life bring that even more to the fore. And yesterday, I went to visit. This is just a powerful example of the emotions, I think. I went to visit with a friend of mine that I adore and that who's been part of my life for years and years. And just realizing, oh my God, it's almost 30 years. That's amazing. Anyway, we've been part of each other's lives for a long time, and I went to meet her. But as I was leaving my house, I walked out. There's a porch. It's a cement porch covered. And every year that I've been here that I can remember, some crazy bird has built a nest in the light above the porch it's more than 12 feet high. And I walked out of my door, and there are 3 baby birds on the ground, not looking so good. So I grabbed up the baby birds, and they were cold, but they were still alive. And I went and got something to take them with me, and I went off to meet my friend with baby birds in tow. And so there's a little more to the story, just that doesn't necessarily have to do with all the emotions, but I'm going to share it anyway because it's cool. The day before, there was a sparrow right outside my window, and I was talking to it, and it would fly away and it would come back, and I would talk to it, and I wanted to coax it into my apartment, but it didn't happen. Anyway, that was the day before I found the birds. So one of the birds was injured and was was struggling. And I was kind of overjoyed to have these birds, to have found these birds. It was magic to me. And had some trepidation about their welfare and very deep concern about the one that was struggling, and figured that it probably was going to die. And so I was with my friend and we were talking, and um, just catching up. We don't get to see each other very often. And then the injured bird died in my hand. And right before it died, it hadn't been doing much of anything, but right before it died, it started flapping, and and then it died. And I cried. And what I realized was that that baby bird gave me an outlet for the confusion of emotions that I've been experiencing. So, loss and space, not lost in space, loss and space, and freedom and expansion, excitement, and reminiscences. So, this jumble of emotion. And I know I'm not alone in experiencing that from time to time. So how do we navigate like our joy and sorrow all at once? All at once. The other two baby birds made it through the night. We'll see what happens with them, but it gave me an opportunity to express some of the emotional energy. Okay, so it's not just sorrow. We don't just cry over sorrow. There's often just this intensity of emotion and energy that is takes us all over the place, right? The thing is, trying to suppress that is a zero-sum game, because while we may suppress it in a moment, it's still energy that needs to be released, to be communicated, to be expressed. And there's nothing wrong with those emotions. People get uncomfortable with tears, that's for sure. But we move energy. We move energy in all kinds of ways. And emotion is probably one of the most efficient and confounding, right? It's not linear. It's not linear. It's not logical. We can be grieving. It's so fascinating. I've watched so many people, including myself, go through the grieving process for the loss of a loved one, where, you think you're done. You think you've done the grieving. You think you're complete, or you don't have any emotion for the longest time. And then 6 months later, bam, a tidal wave just knocks you down and feels like it's going to drown you. And I think the best thing that we can do for ourselves is to allow ourselves to experience the experience of the emotion. Ideally, when we have it, it's not always convenient, you know, crying in Whole Foods, not necessarily the, not necessarily the optimal timing, but if we can allow ourselves to release the pressure from that pressure cooker before it explodes, that's something that will make life so much better for all of us, right? For those of us who are experiencing the emotion, and for those of us who might have to deal with the aftermath of the explosion if that happens. So there's also often I want to say subversion, but I don't know that that's the best word in this case, but a subversion of emotion when, for instance, we may be really frightened, or we may be really anxious, or we may be feeling really insecure, and how it comes out is in anger. That happens sometimes, where we haven't expressed or dealt with the resident emotion, and then it kind of goes to our default expression, which can be depression, it can be anger, it can be almost like a hysteria sort of manic expression too. I don't know if you're hearing the little birds chirping in the background. They're sitting right next to me in a box and chirping. Anyway, I think when we understand that emotions don't have to make sense, there doesn't have to be a reason. Sometimes we just have a feeling. Sometimes we feel sad, and it's likely that there was something that triggered that. And if that makes itself known, great, but if we can allow that emotion is energy, then we can allow it to move through without making a huge story about it. And we can also recognize that emotion as a communication. It's often a communication of, hey, something here needs attention. And sometimes that can be clear, but whenever we respond in an extreme way to a situation, to some kind of circumstance, that emotional response is a communication from our body, being, consciousness, whatever, to be able to say, hey, over here, pay attention over here. I don't know if any of you listen to Bashar. Bashar is an consciousness channeled by Daryl Anka. I think I'm saying his name right. And I saw a Bashar excerpt where he was talking about fear, and how fear is a notification, essentially, that there is something in our belief system that is misaligned, and that it's a clue to reorient ourselves in our beliefs or our approach to something. So Rosalind says, so not wondering the origin, taking a moment to feel, like, what body part am I feeling sensations? I'm so glad you said that, Rosalind. Thank you for that. What we're talking about is not getting caught up in the story, not wondering the origin, as you're saying, but allowing ourselves to presence ourselves to the experience of the feeling. So sometimes it can be helpful to say, oh, I remember this feeling. I felt this feeling when this happened or that happened, rather than getting into the justification of the feeling through a story, but to notice, oh, I remember this feeling and maybe there's something there that still isn't complete. That can be helpful. But what you're saying about where do I feel it? This is a really important part of the core connection work that I do. Is when you're experiencing an emotion, where are you experiencing it in your body? What is that sensation? Because it's energy, it's stuck energy. The more stuck that energy gets, eventually it manifests in a physical way, in a sensation. For instance, people who have a lot of digestive issues, when there's anxiety, where do you feel it? Oftentimes, fear and anxiety in the pit of your stomach, right? Oftentimes, I've had people feel things on their, you know, earlobe practically. I mean, when you're in tune, you can notice that there are sensations all over that correlate with certain feelings. So Sue is saying, allow feelings to flow. Exactly, because it's energy. If you imagine a garden hose, there's water going through the garden hose. You crimp the garden hose, you're cutting things off, but you're creating a pressure system. And so if we can allow the feelings to flow, the energy to flow, we don't have to make up additional stories about it. Like, when we get angry, it's really easy to say that that anger is justified because that person did this, that, and the other thing. And they, whatever, it's all about the circumstance and it's all about that person. The thing is that we do have the ability and responsibility to manage our emotions. And that doesn't mean squash them. To be responsible for our emotions. So you may do something heinous, and culturally we may think, oh, it's okay to go attack that person because they did this, that, and the other thing. And I can be so enraged. I mean, we have plead not guilty by virtue of insanity, right? So we recognize that we get into these crazy fogs of emotion where we become overtaken. But those emotions are ours and they are part of our experience. And we get to take ownership for them and responsibility for them. And they only get to that kind of extreme where we would need to plead guilty by virtue of insanity. They only get to that level of extreme if we have stifled them and suppressed them to the point that they become absolutely explosive. And I recognize that this is not conventionally accepted in our culture, our patriarchal, power-based culture. Women were demeaned for having emotion and still are. And if a man is emotional, he's a sissy. Like, this is a lot of cultural conditioning to overcome to be able to be healthy beings and energetically healthy. It's a lot to overcome. But it's important. It's important for our own well-being, and it's important for community well-being, because we don't want to be powder kegs walking around waiting to be ignited by some silly trigger. Like somebody's carrying around all this rage, and somebody else is driving not to their liking, and all of a sudden you get road rage. Well, what's up with that? It's a redirection of other frustration, anger, and upset. And so if we could learn to be more emotionally intelligent, meaning more alert to the flow of emotion and maintaining that flow, then we'd be a lot better off. And we don't have to figure it all out, because it's not logical. How do you feel joy and sorrow all at the same time? It's messy. It's messy. And so many of us are afraid that if we start feeling emotion, we'll never stop. So I'm here to say, I don't believe that's true. I believe that when we feel it and allow ourselves to feel it without perpetrating a further story that perpetuates it, that it releases, it dissipates and dissolves, and leaves us that much freer and that much more connected and in flow. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's a privilege and a delight to have the opportunity to spend these mornings musing together over what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.